All right, everyone, it is 1:45, so we are going to go ahead and get started just because we have a lot to get through today. So we want to welcome you to our session. Today we are going to talk about MTSS and the pursuit of equity with a focus on Tier 1. I feel like a lot of times when we think about MTSS, we think about students that need extra support, Tier 2, Tier 3. That's where a lot of people's minds jump to. And so we really want to put the focus back on Tier 1 so we can really make sure that we are getting the most bang for our buck with students. And so we will have a lot of information to share with you, and hopefully we can engage with you through the chat, through some polls, and through our Q&A. So just a little logistics. I know you've probably been in other sessions today and you might already know this, but if you're looking at your screen, on the right of your screen, you have event, my agenda, and session. Make sure that you click on the session tab, and then you can access the chat, the polls, people, and Q&A. And so we're going to ask you, please engage with the chat as we go through this. You can engage with each other, make comments, and there will be times when we will actually ask you to put some things in the chat. So throughout the session today, please put your comments in there as you would like to engage with each other. But then if you have a specific question for me or Matt, please put it in the Q&A part so that we make sure that we don't miss that as you're adding in your comments. So any questions that you want us to address, please put them in that Q&A part. And I see people are still adding in. Please, as you're kind of rolling in here, if you can add in your title, your job role, and then where you're from, just so we can get a feel for who all is here. So welcome, everyone. We will go ahead and dive in here. So we just wanted to introduce ourselves briefly, who will be presenting to you. I'm Allison Dauernheim. I am the MTSS coordinator at Glenview District 34, Glenview, Illinois. It's a suburb just north of the city of Chicago. So excited to be here with you all today. And then Dr. Silverman will introduce himself.
Hi, I'm Matt Silverman. I'm the Assistant Superintendent for Teaching and Learning, and we are really excited to have this time to share and interact. We are both people-y type of interactions, so I'm digging all the screens and trying to keep a focus here, but it is awesome seeing all you put your information in the chat. What amazing representation from across the country, so thank you.
We're very excited to hear from you all and see what great work you're doing, and just hopefully share some things that we're doing as well. So just to start with, here's our loose agenda. We're going to talk a little bit about kind of prerequisites for being able to get some of this work done in terms of teaming structures and infrastructure at your buildings, how you might interpret your data and disaggregate your data to be able to kind of determine if there are any achievement gaps or inequities that you need to address, and then how you might then put some things into action to address some of those concerns that come up through your data. So that is what we will be addressing today. Matt, take it away.
All right, yeah. So, like, it's real life in schools, maybe sometimes referred to as a little microcosm of the bigger picture of life. But when we think about Tier 1, we think about MTSS, we think about our children, our staff, our purpose of school, which mostly is, of course, our academics. And then now most recently, we're seeing the extreme value of social, emotional, and wellness and all these other components of being humans. So all of those things are sort of maybe shifting and changing a little bit. And so, of course, we have challenges. You have challenges. And we're going to contextualize ours today with some data. Now, I know you all love data, like we love data, but it's a constant reminder when we think of information is every data point has a child and a child's story behind it. And we're always trying to make meaning and contextualizing sources of information, standardized testing, formative assessments, summative assessments, all the different ways that we can try to see how children are learning and what they're doing in terms of performance. And the first set of data that we want to really just share as a point of interest, it's interesting to us. If you're an NWA MAP group fan person experienced with it, I personally really appreciate fresh data, like fresh fruit and vegetables. It's important. When we talk about equity, sometimes the data gets it's older, or it's information that may or may not resonate with ourselves, our purpose, our passion, our mission. So as we thought about how to begin the data story, the narrative, and especially in a tier one environment, when we're talking about all of our children inside of all of our general education settings, I felt like we cannot just swipe away at the whole COVID impact. And as every year goes by away from maybe the official end of the pandemic, whenever that was, I keep thinking, our administrative team keeps thinking, are children different, or are these gaps different? Are these achievement opportunities different or more or less meaningful? So as I was thinking about that, and we administer NWA, we have for a long time in the district, I wanted to pull this chart, and you can see it's really fresh. It's from last year, which is pretty amazing in terms of data. And just a quick visualization of, I'm going to say still, I don't know, maybe 5 years from now, we'll still be saying the impact of the pandemic and the rate of pre-pandemic growth and children sort of meeting their academic expectations year over year versus now what I think you all are facing, we're still working through it, the rate of improvement post-COVID. And so specifically to when we're talking about equity and diversity, inclusivity, and the lens here, you can see on these two charts of reading and math, there's a pre-COVID indicator, and then the reality of the less movement, the depreciated movement, or typical expectations in terms of growth from last school year. And you can see again, I just wanted to kind of set this tone, and you can see in this information and in the chat, or as we're cruising along here, maybe something like this again. Is the world different? And we're looking at this kind of data like, oh yeah, we're living this. Are we living this for a few years, for 5, 6, 7? Who knows? And then the next slide, just to again sort of think, like, the other terminology is the new normal. I don't really know what that means, but this then you can see is the catch-up interpretation. Again, it's NWA research, but it's super fresh. It's very new, and you can see the disparity or differences or the rate of improvement or lack thereof between the different ethnic and demographic groups. And again, I think COVID makes a really difficult scenario in terms of historically oriented opportunity gaps, achievement gaps, even more difficult to kind of process as your learning teams, as your improvement teams. And so again, you could see what this is speaking to, I think. All right, we're going to keep moving along here. So on a broader, bigger picture, and again, this is as fresh as 2021, high school graduation rates, just to make sure we're spanning into upper grades here in terms of some contextualized data. They're usually pretty old and outdated, and in your own districts, I'm sure you process much quicker than the research groups out in the nation. But You can see this one struck me interestingly too, both the ethnic demographic element and then the gender piece. And just speaks to, again, some of the experiences and challenges and opportunities that we have as a school district. And while we ended 8th grade and then there's a different district for high school, we see, and our high school district sees, these are all of our children all the time from pre-K all the way through senior year of high school. These are our children. And so this just kind of mirrors sort of the similar experience on a national level. So we can go to the next data point. And again, just on a big picture and to make some meaning on the side that we as a district at least have invested a lot of time and energy and resources because it is so critical to a child's experience at school. And that being social emotional learning, behavior, regulation, executive functioning, all those other parts that are not necessarily included in something like a NWA academic map assessment or graduation rates. So just to give you some context and some information, this is actually for Illinois, because we're Illinois, in Illinois at least, and you can probably do this for your state as well. This is what all of the public school ethnicity breakdown is for the state of Illinois. So you can see, and if you could just capture this like real quick in your short-term memory, and you could see the African-American, Black population, Hispanic, Asian. And so if you take a quick mental snapshot of this, and then our next slide, this is something brand new for the state of Illinois. Alice and I were, because you have this by district and school, it just reinforced, it spoke to us. And you can see then when you look at the rates of discipline and then the type of action, in school suspension, out of school suspension, the disproportionality, and we talk about that a lot in our district. You can see it speaks heavily in this short, tiny little graphic, but you can see the total number of students, the number of incidents, and then how it lays out. And I thought that would just kind of help us build a little bit of, and again, this is all from a tier 1 lens, sort of the biggest picture and the understanding with that. So we gave a little mini lesson. Now we want to give you a quiz. It does count for your grade, by the way. So all the bad teaching we're about to do, be stressed out and anxiety ridden. No, I'm just kidding. We want to be funny on this, but I'm not funny. Allison's the funny one. And I can't see any of you other than your little circles. So it's really hard to be funny. So if that was funny, okay, LOL. Thank you. I got a LOL. All right. So we have we have a poll. And this is going to be, thank you for the positive reinforcement in the chat. So we are going to fire off this poll for the first time, and hopefully it works. So
I just pushed the poll out. I don't know if you can see it in your notifications, or if you click on the poll section, you should be able to see a question. Matt, do you want to say anything about that? Or if people can start to answer the question in the poll. Do people see the poll?
Yeah, and I can't, I don't think. Oh, wait, it is on draft. Oh.
So if you click on poll next to chat, click on polls, you should be able to see a poll that says representing the least amount of segregation. Do you see that poll? Yeah, scroll down. Okay, all right, go ahead.
See, but I can't vote.
Oh. Okay. You see the one representing the least amount of segregation in Southern schools? That should be the poll. It says it's published.
We are getting votes.
We are good. Oh, are we?
If you press show.
Got it. Okay, so people are able to vote. Thank you.
Oh, go to the bell on the top right. Okay.
All right, we'll give people another second to find it and to vote.
Lots of co-teachers in here. Thank you.
Okay. Okay, do you want to, so if everyone can see, here's the result. You can see here, can everyone see those results there? For your votes, it looks like the majority of people thought either 1988 or 2011. Matt, do you want to reveal the answer?
Okay, the answer is 1988. You could put in the chat how you did and how it made you feel. I'm just kidding. And, were any of you surprised? All right. So we are going to. Do we have another one, Allison? We do, right?
Yeah, I think just in terms, just to kind of talk a little bit about that, that was surprising to us because that in 1988 was the lowest rate of segregation for Black students nationally. And then it's risen. So segregation of Black and Hispanic students has risen nationally since 1988, which I found to be quite surprising. Like you would have expected, I mean, you know, in terms of like the progress that we would hope to have made, that would have, the number would have lessened, but we've only gotten more segregated since then. So that was surprising. So we will go on to our next one. So you should be able to see the poll now. How much less money per pupil do school districts serving the most students of color receive compared to districts serving the fewest? So we'll go ahead and vote on that second one that should be in that bell notification. You see some votes rolling in.
Yeah, I'm getting the hang of this now. I see it.
It's a new platform, a little different. And we're just reading some of the chats. It is sad and unfortunately. It's sad and unfortunate for sure.
Yeah,
okay.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Sorry. Let me get. So we have. I'm gonna reveal the answer here. So the answer is $1,800. $1,800. And the footnote on this one, the funding gap is nearly twice as large as the gap between the nation's highest and lowest poverty districts, illustrating that the school funding gap is not based only on socioeconomic status, but basically, unfortunately, like in the state of Illinois, where you were born.
Mm-hmm.
So again, any reactions or oh yeah, Olivia sadly got that right. Yeah. Same in New Jersey. Okay.
All right, let's do one more before we move on.
Okay.
All right, so I just published the last poll here. So the overall white-black achievement score gap among fourth grade students is equivalent to approximately what length of classroom instruction? 3 months, 6 months, 1 year, or 2 years? Can people see that one? Should be the third poll if you scroll up. People having a hard time seeing that one? Oh, it's just me not looking at the results. Here we go. There we go.
All right. So the answer is 2 years.
Most people got that one correct, as we
Yeah.
set you up for that one probably.
2 years, obviously pre-pandemic and all the other things going on in the world, but just the reality again. By the way, you all get an A+, and you should go back and tell your school boards that you deserve a raise because you did so well on this assessment, and you deserve a raise for that.
All right. So we will move on. Hopefully that kind of just, we just wanted to kind of like set the stage. These are things that we all know and understand, that we see these gaps. And I think a lot of times we think, we kind of just say, that's the way it is, and I think today we're hoping to say that is the way it is. And like, we probably all are experiencing similarities, but we're not okay with it. And we need to have a little bit more of a sense of urgency and kind of rethinking how we instruct our students, and to just say this is unacceptable. So that's kind of our purpose for today. So Matt, you want to go through these last few slides before we jump into the other content?
So, again, learning is personalized. Education is all about the person, us as people. And so when Alice and I are going to be kind of referencing our world and our work, we are going to be looking at it from this lens. And again, this is our aggregate sort of big picture information, then broken down into disaggregated student groups. So we thought it would be interesting and important to share how our particular Glenview 34 district demographics look. Any of you in the chat, are you close, like something close to this, or like way different, or real fast, like demographic wise? Does this resonate with you? Like 98% Hispanic, okay, 80% Black, okay. Yeah, thanks. Yeah, 80% Hispanic, okay. 15 years ago. Wow. Okay. Yeah.
I was just going to add, I find our district is a little bit unique in that we have quite a big discrepancy in, our socioeconomic status. We have a lot of affluence, but we also have students that are, coming from much less affluent backgrounds, free and reduced lunch. And we have kind of like a smattering of different ethnicities, and we're a little bit unique in that respect.
Thank you, everybody, for sharing. It's so interesting to see all this. Again, this is awesome, very powerful. Okay, so we then wanted to just overlay that with some achievement information. And speaking of 15 years ago, at least for us, and I hope for you all, it was a faster move, but even the sensitivity around discussing our demographic information and our ethnic groups and differences in achievement and our opportunity gaps and all of these disproportionality situations, we part of the MTSS and Tier 1 is we just had to keep pushing the honesty and uncomfortableness factor. And we have to look at our data as it makes meaning to us. And this type of a layout, super quick and easy, but you can see differences. And that's our responsibility to ensure that every single child is maximizing their potential. And they are not. And teachers, some people, that's rough to think about. It hurts your heart. But you could see the meets and exceeds. The IAR is our state test. Okay. Yeah. And thank you for those comments in the chat. It's hard to see this type of information. What percentile map is considered? So this is above the 25th percentile in terms of map. Oh, so yeah, we got to move on. And that's Allison pacing. Otherwise, I'll sit here and chit chat with y'all in the chat too long. So, all right, Allison, I think you're going to talk about the.
Sure. Yeah, I can talk. So this is just another way to look at this is our district data. So looking at our IAR data, which is our state test, the Illinois Assessment of Readiness. And so this is national, and our MAP scores were national norms as well. But this just shows you, this is the percentage of students that met or exceeded on the IAR ELA test in our district. You can see from the 17-18 year, which was a different test, and then we changed to IAR. But you can see the black dotted line is all students, and then white is red, Asian is green, and then black is orange, and Hispanic is yellow. And so you can see very clearly that we have some differences in achievement that are falling along our ethnicity lines. And what we have a very small percentage of Black students. So obviously we want to do better with our Black students, but it's not a huge number, but our Hispanic students are a bigger number. And so what we really have focused a lot on is what's going on and how can we do better. So just so you have a little bit of background information on our district and our issues that we're trying to solve. So really quickly, if we can just have a little reflection. I know you've been putting things in the chat, but what do you feel like? What does your profile look like? You already kind of like put that. Is there something that resonated with you, or are there things that you're seeing, or kind of these achievement differences that you're seeing in your district? We could talk about this forever. I wish we had more time. Just seeing if anyone has anything to add in the chat before we move on. Oh, your multilinguals are faring well. We'd love to hear what you're doing in your district, because this is something that we're constantly striving to improve in our district. Caitlin, same with us.
Wow. Yeah, IEPs, huge struggle. Yeah. Tier 2.
It does sound like a lot of people are seeing what we're seeing with our English language learners, and trying to figure out how to better meet their needs. We'd love to hear if people share things that they're doing that seem to be working around that. Would be amazing, because I think we could all benefit from that. So you can keep adding things in the chat. I am going to move on just because we have a lot to cover. Okay, so we talked about, we know we have this issue, we have this problem, we have this challenge that we're all seemingly trying to tackle. And so our kind of inclination is to just tackle it. Like, let's get moving. But I'm saying this is a complicated thing, right? This is not just as simple as, a straight line from you do this, there's a lot of things that have to be in place. And so I want to talk a little bit about these prerequisite pieces that I would argue are imperative to have in place before you can really, truly, systematically address these concerns. And so we'll kind of talk through each of these pieces, starting with reviewing of best practices. So I'm sure you're all aware of John Hattie and his meta-analysis study of like tens of thousands of different studies, really looking at what kind of instructional strategies have the most impact on student outcomes. And so you can see the effect size of the two things I circled: collective teacher efficacy. So that kind of idea that teachers feel this sense of, being able to come together and collaborate and feeling like they are empowered to make change that affects student outcomes. So just that kind of feeling that they have the power to help students grow. Is like the most effective thing that you can do in a school. And it's really about a mindset shift. And then response to intervention. So, this idea of MTSS, putting supports in place and, measuring progress, and being responsive to what your data is showing is one of the most important things that you can do. So starting with that's where we kind of think about, okay, those are the things we need to keep in mind as we're building our systems. And so the first step is getting that infrastructure in place. So what committees do you have? What committees do you have in place? What's your calendar for meeting? Who needs to attend which meeting? What are we talking about at these meetings? So we have so many meetings as educators, but I feel like a lot of times people leave not feeling like there's, were any actionable things talked about. What's the follow-up? Do we even know why we're here? So I think really kind of doing a meeting audit and thinking about how you can make sure that you have the right teams, the right people at the table talking about the right things. And that is so important. So this is just an example. I'm just sharing this as, this is what how we restructured things over the last few years in Glenview. You might have another way. We're not saying that this is like the be all end all, but just thinking about how we thought through, okay, school improvement team is our tier 1. We're looking at tier 1 data. And then we have what we call our student planning teams, which really look at, which students might need additional support. What might that additional support be, academic or SEL, and monitoring the progress of students receiving that support. Then we get teachers more involved in having these student success meetings, which is, again, something unique to our district, where we're talking about those students that need support with general ed teachers and how they can differentiate in the classroom. And then as needed, having much more in-depth tier 3 individual problem solving meetings. So just really thinking about what structures do you have in place, who needs to be on these teams, and how often are they meeting. This is just another visual of kind of our meeting structure that you can look at in your handout. So that, that might seem simple. That took a lot of time, and we are still kind of working through that and getting people. We have 8 different buildings, and just making sure people are calling things by the same name and kind of building that consistency and those agendas. So that does take a lot of time, but it is so important. And so from there, we're thinking about, how do we set goals? What do we want to work on? What do we need to focus on? And so we used, I don't know if you're familiar, probably some of you are, the SAMI, the self-assessment of MTSS implementation. It's a pretty in-depth rubric that goes through these 6 different kind of areas of MTSS. We had our teams fill this out, and we were able to see what was rising to the top of like our strengths and what were those areas that we really needed to kind of work on. And so from there, we pulled out these priority goals based on the SAMI items, and that's what was the basis for our multi-year plan. And so you can see last year we were focusing all on the school improvement planning process. This year we have student success meeting planning, and so on and on, based on our SAMI results. So we kind of laid that out there so that we were able to communicate that to teachers and to our community, and so everyone kind of knew what we were going to be, everyone knew what we were going to be focusing on. So then from there, we needed to communicate this. So how are we going to make sure that each building is staying on top of this progression that we're talking about? And so it's a task. All of this is like a lot of work, and people's time and people's ability to kind of leave their buildings and to have these meetings, but we were prioritizing it. And so thinking about, how do we have regular meetings with our district MTSS leadership team to be able to provide, just updates on what we are expecting them to do, what are these goals, making sure we're monitoring progress, and what are we going to communicate to the larger staff. So from that, we mapped out a calendar of when our district committees would meet, similar to how I talked about at the building level. You have to have a calendar of when your building committees are meeting. We also, very important for people to see, how often are we meeting at the district level? What are we talking about? Who needs to be there? So they can kind of block that out based on what our goals are. So just making sure everyone is in the loop, and then go forth and do the work. That's, getting people to go out there, try the things. Then we meet back again in 6 weeks and we talk about it, and we just can kind of continue that process. So I'm going to have us just stop a second and reflect. I have another poll for you. And so I'd love to hear from everyone. Do you feel that whether you're at the district level or the building level, Is your teaming and communication structure really laid out? Is it articulated and consistently implemented? Is it maybe articulated like you have it on paper, but are people actually kind of like living it and actually doing it? Or are you at the stage where we have to get going with this? We haven't yet kind of memorialized anything on paper, and obviously we're not implementing it if we don't have it. So where are people at? I'm just curious with all of that. So I'm just looking at the result. Can everyone see the results? Can you see my screen where I'm showing the results? So it looks like a lot of you are saying you do have kind of this structure, but it's inconsistently implemented. And I think that's probably pretty common. And then a good chunk of you are also saying you don't have anything kind of spelled out yet. And it's an opportunity to kind of move in that direction. Any thoughts that people have about this that you want to add to the chat? Yeah, Olivia, I love that. I think it's so important to kind of get your staff's take on things, and that really helps you, because for us, rather than just like me and Matt and whoever else at the district level dreaming up what we think, and a lot of times we have a good finger on the pulse of what needs to be happening, but rather than us kind of saying that, getting staff input as the basis for that, because a lot of times they're right on, and you can like really use their input as why we're doing this, and then it gives people more buy-in. Building a plane in flight, yes, that's constantly how we're feeling. I think there's just no other way to do it. I don't think. Matt, did you have something you wanted to say?
There's a question on who is on your MTSS committee. You want to just quickly?
Oh yes. Okay, so we have a bunch of different committees, but for the most part, our kind of core leadership group is what we call our student planning team, which is like that's that core group at each building, and then we come together every 6 weeks. It's our admin, so it's your principal, assistant principal, your psychologist, your interventionist, and our coach at the elementary level, and they're the core group who really are kind of driving this. But then the idea is that they go back to their buildings, they communicate, and they kind of implement these things, and so the greater staff is still in the loop, and that's the goal. Okay. I am going to move on. Like I said, keep adding things to the chat, add questions that you have, and we can kind of go through that as they come up. Okay, so as I was saying, like we have this thing that we are all trying to tackle nationally, that we know that we have these gaps in student achievement. We know there's things that we have to get in place that are seemingly disconnected. And I think that's where making sure that you have a good understanding of those prerequisite things that I just talked about, they're so connected to being able to actually tackle this problem, because it needs to be a systematic way that we're going about this, and getting those teams, getting the right people in the loop, and having that infrastructure in place so that you have the time to have the conversations that need to be had, rather than feeling so reactive. And so I think building your teaming structure is critical, and building out what those agendas look like, and all of that, getting those common language, so important. And so now, once you have this in place, which again, this is not a quick, coming into my role, it was like, okay, we want to change this. It's hard. You got to get people that have been doing things the same way for so long and doing their own thing to really buy into this. And so it's a process. But once we had that in place, we have the venue for these conversations to really take off. And so now we're ready to start to really dig into how are we going to address this problem. So I'm going to invite you to read this quote, and I love this, and I'm hoping that you can just add, like, what resonates with you, add that into the chat. Any thoughts on this? So I love this quote because it's too often we kind of think about, like, and everybody means well. I don't mean to say people don't mean well, but what are we, instead of saying this is out of our control, we can't do anything about this. This is what every other district is dealing with. But this is saying, what can we do? Like, well, there are things that we can do, and how can we, what can we as a school or as a district do to tackle this? What's within our control? And so I think that's really what we have to focus on, because I think people can get so caught up in just thinking about how this is such a complex issue and mired in that kind of negative thinking versus like, let's be proactive. What can we do? So I think that's why I really like this quote. So I'm going to go back to we call this our student success roadmap, but I'll go back. So based on all of that collecting of data, setting goals, we kind of mapped out our multi-year plan. And you can see that last year we did a lot of work on our school improvement planning process. And so I just want to put it all on you all. Like, and we have to hurry here because we have a lot to get through, but why do you think the SIP is important to focus on? We focus on the SIP because, like I told you, tier 1 is key. And so we need to be looking at things from a global, big picture perspective versus looking at tier 2 or tier 3, where we're looking at smaller groups of kids. We really need to have a good tier 1 system in place. We need to be looking at our data from a tier 1 lens in order to really know how can we get the biggest bang for our buck. So we really wanted to start with that school improvement planning process. So this is a representative team of staff and admin across each building, where we're looking at our building-wide data. We're looking at our NWA MAP scores, AIMWeb scores. On the SEL behavior side, we're looking at Panorama. We're looking at Panorama I don't know if many of you use that, but we do a survey for students on their perception of different areas of, regulation, connections to school, things like that. We look at our behavior logs and different things. So we're looking at our data from a tier 1 lens. And then our SIP teams are saying, what are the goals that we need to work on based on this? What are the strategies that we're going to roll out, and how are we going to provide professional learning to our staff? And so, and then they monitor the goals and implementation of our strategies. So everyone does this, right? But like in the past, we had people filled out the piece of paper, submitted it, and maybe didn't really reference it. We wanted this to be a living, breathing process. And really, we did want to do SIP planning to elevate equity. So the primary question we're having our school improvement teams ask is, are we meeting the needs of all of our students? And that is key with this, because someone put this in the chat, and it's the crux of everything that we know in our district, that we can look at our data and say, yeah, we're doing awesome when we look at all of our students, and if we kind of tier them all. But then when we begin to disaggregate, we're like, oh, we have some work to do. So we have student groups that it's glaringly obvious that we are not meeting their needs. And so through these SIP discussions, first, we need to kind of like make it pop out. How do we make sure that our data is prepared in a way that allows people to see this, like that brings this to life? And so that maybe your teams, and like Matt alluded to earlier, this is a sensitive topic for a lot of people. And so how do we let the data speak for itself? And so this is kind of not the best graph, but like these are supposed to be like your MTSS triangle. You can see these are our MAP scores in grades 3 through 8, looking at the fall, winter, spring of a couple of years ago. And you notice that the vast majority of our students are like over 80%. They are falling within tier 1, greater than the 25th percentile. And so these look great. These look exactly how you'd want them to be. Maybe we have a tiny bit more students than we want in tier 3, but we're doing pretty well. And so we can really congratulate ourselves, pat ourselves on the back. We're awesome educators. But then when you kind of look at, when you tier each ethnicity or each program, you can see that the needs pop out, right? And so you can see the first bar graph there is all of our students. And then hopefully you're able to very clearly see our Hispanic student population. When we just tier all of our students who are designated as Hispanic, you can see that only 59% of our Hispanic students are falling within tier 1, and 27.7% are falling within tier 3. That means over 1/4, if 1 in 4 students who are Hispanic are requiring tier 3 support. So that is our biggest issue. You can also see EL and IEP, which again, that's a concern. However, I'm much more concerned with this Hispanic because you are EL or you have an IEP due to a need. Hispanic, there's no, that's not due, that's you're not identified as Hispanic due to a need. And so we really are trying to figure out how to better meet the needs of that particular group of students. And so this is the way that you can look at your data. Another way that I've really come to find resonates is is this concept of risk ratios. So I don't know if people are familiar with this, but risk ratio is calculated by dividing the risk of a particular outcome for children in one racial or ethnic group, dividing that by the risk of the same outcome for children in all other groups. Okay, so I'm going to kind of contextualize that. So say we're looking, like I said, we talk a lot about meeting the needs of our Hispanic students. So you might look at, for this top part, what is the number of Hispanic students in our district that are falling below the 10th percentile, which is what we define as tier 3, divided by the total number of Hispanic students in our district. So that would be the numerator. And then the denominator will be all other students who are falling below the 10th percentile divided by the total number of all other students. So if you think about that, we want that to be proportional. We want the numerator, so the likelihood of being tier 3 to be the exact same whether you're Hispanic or whether you're not. So the closer to 1, the better. And so you can see this graph kind of shows it, that 1, I kind of highlighted the 1 in black. And then the likelihood of needing tier 3 support if you're Black is about 2.5 to 3 times higher than any other student. If you're Hispanic, is 4 times higher than any other student in our district. And so that's pretty eye-opening. And then you can see if you are Asian or white, you're less likely to be identified as needing tier 3 support. So I think this is sometimes pretty illuminating for people as well. So another way to just like bring that data to life. And then okay, so this is like our EL and IEP, which again, you can see, and it's kind of nice to see actually the risk is going down over time too. So that's another way you can kind of like monitor progress. And then I already showed you this one. You can also look at your state test. And so this is the percent that meet or exceed, and you can really see if there are differences by ethnicity in that test as well. So those are just some ways that we have kind of brought this data to the forefront. I'm wondering if other people have any other ways that they've kind of shown, how they kind of bring this to life at their buildings. And yet, Heather, you made a really good point in here. Ethnic groups also count in ELs and IEPs. That's exactly right. And so we could do a little bit more digging to really disaggregate even further, like Hispanic students that aren't EL, because that is interesting to me as well. Like, is it mostly, we have a lot of other EL students that are not just Spanish speaking. And so it would be interesting to really dig a little bit deeper because there's overlap in the ethnic groups related to EL and IEP as well. All right, so we can keep the conversation going in the chat. I'm going to keep moving on, just with the interest of time. Okay, so again, this is the $1 million question because we all, again, we can show that we have this problem and we can get these other prerequisite systems in place. But I think we're all like, what do? We really are motivated to do something about it, but what? And so I wish I had that wonderful answer for you today, but I don't have a great answer for that other than how you do the work at the building level and at the district level is like starting to have these conversations. And so first step, staff awareness, making sure all staff have a clear understanding of what the data is saying and what the building needs to work on. So this is potentially sensitive. Matt talked about this at the beginning, and we had some difficult conversations with our staff. People are very invested in their students, and we have EL teachers who, a lot of people, like when you show this data, there was finger pointing. And so it's kind of like this, it goes back to that collective teacher efficacy. These are all of our kids. This is not the EL teacher's problem to fix. This is all of us. We all have to come together and take ownership of all these students. And so really making it so this is not to point fingers at anyone. This is how do we get people motivated? How do we get people energized to really do this work? And so I think it is something to think about, the approach of how we're sharing this with people. But then you share this, you make people aware, you put this in your school improvement plan, and this is what we are all rallying around. We are all working on this. We are going to have, what we do is we have a half day after each benchmark to review that newly collected data and see how are we doing towards our goals, and what are the strategies, and how are we going to provide that professional learning to staff. And all of our SIP goals in some way address our achievement gaps. And so this is something that our buildings have all, we didn't even say you have to do this, but they all are very committed to this. Our principals and teams are committed to this work, and that's a big piece of their SIPs, is really thinking about how they can better meet the needs of our EL students and our Hispanic students. And so then they meet monthly and they check in and they look at progress and they kind of try to keep that SIP alive. I don't know that we have time to look too closely into this, but this is a SIP worksheet that, let me see if you can see it. Oh, you can't. Okay. I'm not going to pull that up, but it shows you, and I will actually add this to the links. I'll have them add this to the link so that you have access to this. But we have a SIP worksheet that goes through the problem-solving model. And it really is the questions that our SIP teams ask on disaggregating your data and then creating a plan of attack, and then coming back to the table at the next benchmark to see, did it work? Are we still seeing the same gaps? What can we change? And so that kind of guides the conversation of the school improvement teams after each benchmark. So it's important. All of this is like, these conversations are so important, and it really is kind of a work in progress, but the conversations and what we do through that SIP plan is the work. And so Matt's going to talk a little bit about the fact that before we really say, okay, we're going to uproot everything, we're going to make major changes, we really want to start with looking at what are we doing at the tier 1 level? Is it being implemented? Do we need to it might be as simple as, can we just make sure that we're doing what we said we're going to be doing at the tier 1 level?
Right. So I, as an administrator, fall into the trap of a lot of assumptions and assuming and thinking that there are these universal beliefs and understandings and ideas. And really around tier 1, I thought a general education homeroom teacher sort of understands or knows or has some background knowledge. And that, now I'm talking about 100%, like every single staff member, right? Because all is all, and all of our children are all of our children, all of our staff are all of our staff. So we need to know. And you can go through an exercise and define what it is tier 1 is to you or for you. These are just some points, some ideas. The most recent kind of ebb and flow is around the linguistic element and the culturally sustaining. And that's where we've been making some shifts to ensure it's systematic and systemic in our day-to-day teaching and our instructional practices. But we are really building this notion of inclusivity into our general education homeroom settings. And that resides on the fact that we know day to day, week to week, month to month, both from an achievement viewpoint and then from a pedagogical and instructional standpoint, what is our tier one and what is our expectation and what have we built. And I think the ultra sensitivity for teachers is the balance between the system and the systematic curriculum, instruction, pacing, scope and sequence, all of those elements, and then their expertise, because they have a set of children sitting in front of them with unique needs. And we are always processing that concept, systems versus the reality of little human beings or big human beings in front of us and their needs. So if we go to the next slide, again, you are all experts in this, and you all live universal design, or these ideas. This for our headspace. There's a book recommendation that's awesome. You know what might resonate with your staff, but again, we thought this was pretty clear information and knowledge for, again, 100% of our staff, because everybody needs to live this and breathe it and know it. And so we've been building these things. And speaking of living and breathing, our curriculum is just that, right? Year to year, even month to month, and whatever you have in terms of your professional learning communities, or if you have another system where week by week you're analyzing how the curricular experience is actually resonating in the classrooms. But that's a key element. And if it's not established, I think somebody wrote in the chat, we're just going to be piling on tier twos and tier threes onto a dysfunctional tier one. And it's this hamster wheel of working really, really hard, but maybe not really, really smart and productive. So just some points around that. And then we can move to the next slide, because I know we're running out of time here. And so to kind of bring things wrapped up as much as we can, put a gigantic, enormous topic and theme and spirit and energy and all the amazing sharing that you've been doing in the chat into some considerations. Again, you all have been talking about the need to disaggregate your data. It's absolutely essential. And then you look for those opportunities. And if you don't have any, that's amazing. But right, we all have them somewhere and for some reason, and it is our responsibility to address them. As Allison started to detail, and I think we are going to share the presentation, right? Or it is shared, yeah. So the teaming structure is really elaborate in terms of what Allison has helped to build. So you've got a quick glimpse of that. The school improvement planning team, again, we processed through that, and you all were contributing to the importance and how you're living through that experience. The agendas, again, sometimes, maybe many times, we're really good at getting together. And then are we productive or being useful as we get together? And there's all those memes and funny things about the difference between groups of people getting together and actual teams and productive adults and that kind of stuff. So it's you think, oh, the agenda, well, it's really important. It looks like too, again, many of you are looking at staff awareness, input surveys, Google surveys, focus groups. We all need to know, and we all need to be honest with ourselves. And you know this, you live this. And if we can't, maybe this isn't the right space, but we say it over and over again. All means all. All doesn't mean most. All of our children are all of our responsibility. And as you see on that last bolded bullet point, consider what your building is doing about the inequities. Again, this is a tier one lens that we've been talking about the last hour or so, and what can you ensure that your plan is going to focus on. And that could bring us to the next slide here. And another one of our favorite quotes. We'll leave some space here for you to read it. And we thank you so much for your time and energy. There's a little bit of some logistics. I think maybe, is there a slide? So I don't want to forget, or maybe Allison, you know, all the rules that we need to look at, or
I don't know. I think this is it. And I know people have to go, but there is a question here. Do you have an MTSS team and SIP team? How do they overlap? No. All the teams that I showed you are MTSS. And so that was a big shift for people, not having like a specific MTSS team. It's really our SIP is our tier 1. Our student planning team is really guiding our tier 2 and tier 3. And so, you know, for you to take a look at different committees that you have, you know, SIP and MTSS, we used to have those as separate, but I'm like, we're doing redundant work. And so really thinking about how to work smarter, to streamline, so you're having not redundant conversations where you have two groups working on sometimes similar things and then it's confusing and it just doesn't work. So just to answer that question. But other than that, we'd love it if you can always, you know, follow us on Twitter. You can add us on LinkedIn, you know, whatever you want to do. You have our names, but it was great talking to you. We could probably talk another like 3 hours about this. We love this stuff. But we hope that you have a great rest of your session. And hopefully there's an evaluation, I'm assuming, that you can fill out so we can get some feedback on how to make this better.
Thank you, everybody.
All. Have a lovely day.
Take care.